When you're in reactive, you're in firefighting mode all day long. Your days are hectic. You don't have structure. You can't advance what you're trying to do to improve your staff, your company, your client experience, your resident experience. You just get stuck in the muck and you really can't proceduralize. And it's not until you proceduralize that things get better.
Hello, professional property managers. Welcome to the Triple Win podcast. I'm here with Bryan Jenkins and Jonathan Cook of AHI Properties. And if you're not familiar with AHI and these guys, let me give a little bit of background, all right? They have a corporate rental business that's actually been around for 30 years, which is kind of unique. They got 10 offices, 6 states represented there. A ton of units, interesting business, cool business, but we're going to keep most of the focus here for what many of you, focus on a day-to-day, which is the long-term single-family rental business and scattered site small multifamily business. They've got 1,100 units. They've been in that business for 20 years. They're in Alabama and Oklahoma. And they have a podcast, by the way. I'd recommend anyone listening to this podcast, you probably want to check it out as well. It's called the Profitable Powerhouse Properties. If you just search that, you can find it. Podcast, and they're great hosts. I know Second Nature's been privileged to be a guest on that podcast. We recommend it to folks often. And specifically about Bryan, Bryan is going to be the 2021, or is the 2021. What year is it? Man.
No one knows. It runs together, doesn't it?
The 2021 RVP of the Southeast. I remember him, my first year in the industry, 2017. He was the Atlanta chapter president, and the Atlanta chapter is a very influential chapter in the NARPM organization as a whole. And Bryan's influence has been felt there locally as well as throughout the entire country, commonly tapped as an educator. And we're not the first person to request him and Jonathan to be on, because these guys are very generous and they really know what they're talking about. And for those less familiar with Jonathan, he runs the business development over at AHI, and just a really fun guy to talk to, also involved in NARPM and playing leadership roles. Great to see. And Jonathan, also, I want to kick it off with, what heat do you like your hot chicken? That's what the people want to know.
The only answer is hotter. I think it's the only way you can go. Whatever you got, just kick it up 5 or 6 notches. One notch, why even? I mean, not step out, man. Of course. Do you remember the chicken that started the chicken? Because it was here in Birmingham that you brought me hot chicken, and I said, Andrew, this is not hot chicken. And you said, well, let me introduce you to some hot chicken.
And he fixed that in Nashville.
He did. Tim Wallace, I assume you're also listening. Congratulations. You ate more than me. There was an odd number left.
All I have to say to end that part of the discussion is, he says it on this side of eating the chicken, but on the back side, he's like, I shouldn't have gone so hot.
It was a bad situation. It was rough. I'm pretty sure I stole milk from your building.
We did get an invoice for milk post-event, and it was worth every penny for the entertainment factor. And it's a test of someone's character, and Jonathan passed the test with flying colors. And I
want to know, I want a post-episode comment number for how many people have no idea what we're talking about. I mean, there's got to be some, but if you don't know, just check Andrew's Facebook page. He has pictures and they're not very flattering, but it was fun.
We'll have to get a link to a photo in the show notes or something like that. That's right. Yeah. So it's not too much of an inside joke, but yes, Hattie B's hot chicken and Prince's hot chicken have made their way into Jonathan Cook's belly, and it was a sight to be seen the second time around. All right. Well, hey, I know people are here to listen to what are some of the best practices in property management. I mean, again, you guys have decades of experience, And it's not just you've been in the property management business for a long time. You guys have been leaders in the industry for a long time. And your organization constantly evolves. You're constantly doing new things. You're constantly pushing the boundaries of how can we create great results for investors and residents alike, and create a great place to work, that attracts and retains great talent. And so we wanted you to be on the Triple Win podcast because those are the kind of people we like to talk to beyond our personal connection. So I want to get started with this, which is, I know you guys have an opinion about working with investors and not just owners. And I'd love for you guys to start there about how you define your ideal customer and why, and what kinds of conversations you're wanting to have with them, based on who they are, and why is that your target customer, investors versus owners? Could you guys start there?
I'm going to let you. Yeah,
I'll set it up as to what our ideal customer is, and then I'll let Jonathan get into the why. If that's fair. And I say this after, getting into property management, doing it for a decade. And I said I used to have a big knot on my forehead because I would walk up to the wall and I'd hit the same spot every time, learning from my own mistakes. And then 2011, I found NARPM, and then from there we've changed drastically through the influences of other property managers who have a lot more experience than I do, and I respect wholeheartedly. But up until that point, we were pretty much, other than ourselves, we were exclusively managing accidental landlords. And to us, by definition, an accidental landlord, as many PMs know, is just somebody that really doesn't hold the property for the intention of holding an investment property. It's most often they lived in the property, they moved out of the property for whatever reason. They didn't sell, they were looking for an alternative. They turned to a local property management company and said, here, manage the property for me. So they have no idea what they're doing as investors. And basically for them, the important thing is if you're taking care of the asset and you're making sure that their mortgage is paid at a minimum, then they feel like that's a successful relationship. So fast forward, actually I should go backwards from NARPM to 07, 08. We all know what happened there as we got into 2009, 2010. We saw the need to diversify our portfolio and really to focus on what we were managing within that portfolio and the percentages of what we were managing. So we didn't get too top heavy. I think 05, we started dealing with some investors that really got upside down because of their philosophies on reinvesting their capital out of one property into another purchase. So they got caught upside down, a lot of short sales, foreclosures. We lost a lot of inventory in 2009 and 10 due to that. So that kind of forced us to think outside that box and really focus in on, okay, we have accidental landlords. You want to always have a percentage of those, but you need some intentional investors. And then beyond that, you need some institutional minded investors. So we started putting together a plan of how we would go about doing that. And then it was really about 6.5, 7 years ago that we really rolled completely into that model and started targeting our ideal clients and then really going after them to bring them in, diversify that portfolio. So we're managing what we consider A class, B class, C class, single family residential, as well as accidental landlords, intentional investors, and institutional investors. And I'll let Jonathan pick it up from there. I just wanted to kind of tee you up for that.
Thank you. So when we're talking about the why do I prefer to develop business with investors versus an accidental landlord? I mean, there's a lot of shorthand in this industry as a whole, and conversations just move quicker when there is a common understanding. And even the most or the least investor-minded property manager just speaks in everyday jargon that if you're not in this industry in any way, shape, or form, if you are I don't know, a veterinarian, and you had a house that you accidentally don't need anymore, and I can't sell it. Oh my gosh, let me accidentally let this company manage it. I mean, you're not going to understand a lot that goes on with it. Every call that I take from an accidental landlord, getting them up to speed with me to even get them to allow us to then show them how good it is an entire day's worth of education piece on just what managing a rental property is, what happens in a rental property, who does maintenance on the rental property. Do I still have to pay for maintenance? Yes. I mean, and any property manager listening to this has had that conversation of, well, okay, you're managing my property, so when like the roof caves in, does the tenant pay for that? No, you do. It's your house. I mean, and having to walk them, because and it's not that they're stupid. It's not that they're uneducated. It's they're not in this industry. They don't know. And so the time it takes to develop that homeowner into just allowing you, the professional in this instance, to then explain to them that you know what you're doing, then start to build the trust, then start to build the relationship, and then take over for them and handle that relationship, long down the road. You're only getting the one opportunity. Do it one time on one address, and that's the only process that you're going to have with them. Whereas an investor, when I'm talking to an investor, I can show my expertise on every one of their homes, every one of their properties. I can show them, not that I know better, that I understand what they're talking about. I can understand their goals, and I can couple with them on their goals, and I'm adding value to myself and my company. I'm not just going to go and collect a rent check, take a piece out, and hand them the rest of it.
No, we've had intentional investors through networks that we've talked out of major purchases. When we analyzed all the information, even though they had independent analysis done in which they're saying yes, and really breaking it out on a 3-year projection. It's no, and have them back away from it before they make a major financial commitment. So, and when you can show them, hey, I do understand what your goal is, and I understand it in a way that I will be able to take you over that finish line. I am more prepared, more, what is the word? I'm just more capable of handling this for you and what you're looking for than someone else, because I understand it from at least everything that you're talking about. And hey, also, I've got these extra tips for you. So you're adding additional value on top of yourself, other than just collect the rent, just get a tenant out when I need to. And please understand, for the listeners, we're not claiming to know.
Oh, of course not.
Anything about everything, but at the same time, everyone will understand when you work with an accidental landlord, the education piece, you're moving backwards to establish a baseline education in the investor, not just jargon, but practices, procedures, all that. But when you get into that intentional investor, they've had some dealings, and more often than not, they've had some dealings with some poor property management companies, and we'll get into what kind of defines that a little bit later. But they've also had some dealings with some skilled property management companies. And then when you get into the institutional guys, those investors, that's when you really up your game and bring your expertise to the table. But at the same time, they're teaching you things that you're going to implement into your practices and into your procedures, actually, to make you a better property management firm.
Some of the ways we report specifically came from those kind of clients too. It's great.
A lot of it is, and a lot of our investment calls and trying to sort through availability and what that property looks like from taking possession, getting it back into marketing and rental, those workflows. So it is, it's always, you made reference earlier, my old phrase, I grew up in West Virginia. I always say I'm just a hillbilly at heart, but my thing is always, my grandfather always used to tell me, it's like, keep your foot on the gas. And that's really my lingo challenge to my team. It's like, we're not going to coast. We're always going to keep our foot on the gas and always become a better property management firm, and always kind of challenge ourselves, step out there and do a better job. So that's why we diversified. It was really in anticipation of the next event, which we knew would come. Now, granted, this event is so much different than the 07-08 event. There's plenty of ways. We've said accidental owners couldn't sell their house. Obviously, that's not the case today. As management firms across the country are losing large percentages of their inventory to sales, including AHI. But it's all in how you regain that traction and bring new business in ongoing on a regular basis. And really, we've referred to it as establishing those funnels where there's, it's more than a drip campaign. It's really, truly is a funnel. There's always lead generation coming in. There's always positive, balance out of positive growth, even amongst all the losses. And sometimes you'll take a big hit and then you rebound from that and move forward. So, but that's it. We just didn't want to get caught with, the old saying of all of our eggs in one basket. We wanted to diversify so we could weather the storm one way or the other. And that is, it's proven to be a good philosophy for us.
I love what you both shared there. And I'd love to, reflect back. And then I want to ask Jonathan to talk about something specific that I know we've talked about previously after that. And what I hear you guys saying is you've got this nice framework of three types of customers. There's the accidental landlord, there's the intentional investor, and there's the institutional investor. And, one of the big benefits that your company is seeing is, hey, working with the latter two, there's less education effort, right, to bring people up to how to work with a professional property manager and value what a professional property manager can do for them. You are able to speak, with terms, I'm sure, like NOI and, cash on cash returns. There's probably, a glossary of terms, I'm sure, that somebody who's new to the game, you kind of bring up to speed. It really gets me to what we hear a lot of leaders in the industry are trying to do to position themselves, which is we're not just a property manager, right? We're not in this business that's kind of perceived, rightly or wrongly by some, as I'm a tradesperson, right? And we have real expertise in consulting that actually enables us to be something more like an asset manager that you would see with any asset class or investment class, whether it's stocks and bonds, whether it's another segment of real estate, et cetera. Having a dedicated asset manager who can go through the kinds of things you guys were talking about, weaving through the conversations with your clients of, let's look at the 3-year performance here. And, hey, we're going to advise you actually not to do this because it doesn't check these boxes, right? And as your asset manager, if you will, these decisions aren't in line with your goals based on what we can see is going, what we believe is going to happen. And we've got decades of experience that tells us, here's what you can expect. Here's what you might do instead, to better reach your goals. You're able to have those kind of conversations and that's chiefly who you're working with. The last thing I'll say here, before getting to my question for Jonathan, is a problem or challenge that we see so much of the professional or dedicated property management industry encountering is what we would call the churn problem. And you referenced it. There are some companies and portfolios based on their customer base, that are losing 30% of their portfolio year over year, right? Or 25% of their portfolio year over year. That's not uncommon across hundreds, thousands of companies to see that.
Particularly in a red hot sales market across the country.
Yeah. So. In the single family industry, certainly.
That's right. And so, okay, well, if you look at that, and let's just say I have 1,000 units, right, to make the math easy. Well, I'm churning 300 units. And so just to keep everybody employed, right, that I've got currently employed and be able to operate, I've got to invest into sales and marketing and everything else to replace. I've basically got to sell, a PMA a day, right? A working day in order to stay where I'm at. And if I have aspirations to grow my company, it's going to be really difficult to do that in that environment. Whereas I imagine many of the clients you guys have worked on diversifying and working with now, I don't know your churn rate, but my bet is it's not 40% or 50%. It's not south
It's
of
not,
that.
but I can tell you, we came into 2020 with, our growth plan for 2020 was tremendous. We had an upside of a 100% growth expectation for 2020.
In February 15th, I had 117 properties under contract to close.
Yeah, and I'll clarify that a little bit. It was 100% for our Birmingham market specifically. So, but we had commitments, and obviously COVID happened, and we still ended up with a pretty nice chunk of that, but probably a third of our realized expectation at that particular point. But fast forward to 2021, and we took a hit. We took a 30% loss hit with a couple of big clients, and the thing I didn't foresee was some institutionals rolling up, and that's what hit us. And then we just got, we had our funnels, and we just started working those funnels and working other projects in our pipeline, because we always have deals that are, they're anywhere from 6 to 18 months out. We know we're working them, we're working those relationships, and just leaning on those a little bit. And we're still just realizing the success we've had with that, and they just continue to thankfully just add to our business and help us not only recover, but then get into positive growth again. So, which is, it's challenging right now, and it's a lot of people across the country are. I've heard a lot of chatter, particularly with the accidental landlord heavy management firms, and they're losing, as you said, anywhere from 30 to 50% of their management portfolios to retail sales. And then, if you look at that even more closely, you're even restricting the amount of available rental homes, because you're pulling them out of a rental pool and inventory, and then rolling them into retail resale, which is going to be owner occupied. So you're making a supply situation even tighter, which is, we could get into a lot of discussions on build to rent and all those different philosophies, but that's why those philosophies are having success as well. And now we're taking a lot of that inventory in, which is, that's been wonderful. Because we hadn't seen new inventory after 07 and 08. Really after 08, we had some new inventory coming in into 07, but brand new construction. And to see that again, that's really nice to have that level of home in our management portfolios.
But even those aren't easy. Even those are seasoned investors. What I have noticed about that churn, it kind of goes into something that we did want to eventually talk about, which is, proactive management versus reactive. Reacting to this is not a great, that's everybody's just going, and screaming.
Well, the proactive example I had is, remember the one we pulled up, we had an investor in Montgomery. It's like, they had a big capital expense come up, and it was like, hey, we got to spend this. I just want to sell it. I'm losing money. It's like, okay. So I told Jonathan, let's go back 3 years and let's lay it all out on our traditional consulting base sheets. We laid it out. He made money every single year. Obviously, some were even better than others. And even this year, when he had a big capital expenditure, he's still making money.
And then when we talked about,
around.
And then when I had the conversation with this, and this guy is an intentional investor. This was not an accidental purchase or an accidental landlord situation. It was, okay, well, let's talk about why you want to get rid of it. Is it because of this one bill? Well, no, I just don't feel like I've been making any money. Well, okay, let's talk about you selling it. If you sell it, this is what you can reasonably expect for sale, which was like less than a 1% gain, because where he had purchased was in an area that just doesn't see a lot of appreciation, even in the current market. And he was like, that's all? And I'm like, yeah, feel free to get someone else's opinion on it, but yes.
Rental rates are appreciating, but not this.
And so then he was like, well, I'm not
Right.
even making any money on this property. I go, well, you have for 3 years. And let's talk about if you do cash out, what are you going to do with it? We stopped. Well, I'd like another investment. I go, one that cash flows? Yeah. Cash flows better than this? Well, I don't think this one's cash flowing. And I put the math in front of him and I go, this is the ledger. This is what you've made. How is that not cash? What is your mortgage? He was like, well, my mortgage is X. And I was like, you've cash flowed $200 a month.
We've all seen firsthand what the advantage of Zoom.
Yeah.
I mean, we were using Zoom before COVID, but really to be able to share screens and show them.
Just put it on an Excel spreadsheet and put it in front of their face and have them tell me where I'm wrong is great. Because then they're like, oh, you're not. Yeah, I know I'm not. And that's where, okay, so going back to, I do want to get to what your actual question is because I don't think we've heard it yet.
You're talking about it right there, which is
Go ahead, ask your question because I think it might be what I'm about to say. Go ahead.
So when we look at the source of this churn, it's a good portion of it is people who are trying to time the market, whether they're an intentional investor, whether they're an accidental landlord, right? And listen, everything they're hearing, whether it's news media, other investors, it's their sister-in-law, is telling them now is the time to sell. And people have been saying that for the last forever,
10 years.
Right? Now is the time to sell. We've been hearing that for years. We will probably be hearing it for months to come, quarters to come, years to come. So, what I think is great is, hey, when people have had that influence and they're coming to you and saying, I'm thinking about making a decision here, right? Here's a decision I'm thinking about making. Can you walk through how you work through that conversation so that, hey, the people that should sell or need to sell do, right? And the people that shouldn't, you can show them a cash out refi. You can show them other things, that actually may be better aligned with their goals.
I think this is exactly the conversation. I mean, I have it tons of times a day. And Warren Buffett has a great quote that it's not timing the market, it's the time in the market that creates wealth. And I mean, this is jumping past, the initial conversation that you have with someone, but ultimately understanding as a property manager the information that you need to impart on this owner that considers selling is you want them to understand that building wealth is never about selling real estate. It's always about owning the real estate. And if you sell it, you no longer own it. And then where are you going to put that money to re-own some real estate? How are you going to find some more real estate to own? Right this minute with all these sales, even if you make enough money to afford another one, what you're competing with is owner occupants that they're going to get those offers in quicker. They're willing to pay more than it's worth because they're not looking at the purchase as an investment. They're looking at it as, I need a place to live. There's a housing shortage. So you're not going to win that battle from an investment standpoint. So getting rid of your current investment that's operating and doing what you wanted, what you had planned initially, is it's a smarter investment decision. Just because you hear all this anecdotal evidence of being the hottest real estate market ever, it's not going down. And that's fine. Just because something gets hot doesn't mean you need to go and play in it. That's great if you happen to need to sell. The only time, in my opinion, that a client absolutely needs to sell is if they're in a hardship and they can't currently afford it. Mm-hmm. If they can't make the payments, they need to sell. This is a fine time to sell because you are going to make at least what you got in it back, likely.
And you have to be able to pivot. I mean, it's even looking at our own portfolio, because we were investors before we got into property management. And so we were buying A-class assets for corporate leasebacks through our corporate housing company. And the original strategy when we bought our first 52 A-class properties was 7 years. We wanted to own them for 7 years, lease them out through multiple corporate tenants, and then flip them out with systems lifespans left for the next investor. Or, in the case of the A-class asset, it would be likely to be an owner occupant. And then '07, '08 hit because we were buying them in 2000 to 2002, really 2001 to 2003. And so it really hit our plan. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to reset the clock because we're going to start, dealing with some HVAC, water heaters and big expenditures. So we ended up sitting tight on that entire portfolio. And now, all these years later, we've started to sell some of them, but we put roofs and HVACs and water heaters and reset those timelines and set them up for the next investors. And now it's benefited us greatly because we're cashing out at a very hot sales market. And then we're even seeing some big names in the industry, institutional, coming into our market space and paying over retail for single properties, trying to build their portfolio presence. And which, as long as I've been in the game, I've not seen that happen. So that was pretty cool. But that's just an indicator of everything that's going on. But to Jonathan's point is, it's literally everybody's hearing this chatter. You're hearing it from the media, you're hearing it from your friends, you go to a cocktail party, people are talking about it.
But it's all Facebook news, man.
Yeah.
It's not incorrect.
No.
It's anecdotal. And this is where, and I
it's
harp
kind of
on
one
this.
goal, one goal fits all. And that's not how it works.
And so that's where, and I'd say this, and I said this in all of my masterminds that I'm in, this is where your education really shines. Educate yourself. Anyone listening, educate yourself on your markets, what they're doing, where that goes. Understand your clients. Understand the investment. You've got to educate yourself. And there's tons of people that know more about it than I do. There's no doubt. But I understand it enough to at least ask those questions well, where does it make sense? Let's walk through this step by step. Tell me where I'm wrong about something, and we'll address that. Because sometimes the investment doesn't work, but the solution isn't always to let go of it. It's, let's figure out what we need to do to make this work. Is that raise rents?
To the point of the example I gave earlier of talking, one of our larger clients out of a major purchase for development was, you kind of work your way into that inner trust circle by proving yourself through your education, through your advice. And then when it comes down to it, you're building a lifelong client because they're putting their trust in your analytics versus somebody that's got skin in the game somewhere else. And that's where you have to be careful because, early on, I learned a hard lesson of working with West Coast investors that were using local realtors, relying on the local realtors to give rent market analysis, and then having that property dumped in your lap with a rent market analysis $250, $300 higher than it should have been back then.
Yeah.
And then you're dealing with some upset investors as to why it won't lease at the listing price that the realtor gave them. So, just making sure that you're coming across, you keep yourself outside the arena of being in the personal space of gain. And because when you do that and you're really working for the best interest of your client, that's going to come to you. You don't have to focus on that up front. It's so transparent. At least I can see it. It's like looking through polarized lenses into the water at fish. It's kind of like, okay, I can see this guy's angle is here. And
he's got to
really
get that sales commission, so it's important for him.
That's
to
right.
That sales,
unfortunately,
that
that's human nature, and to be able to identify that and keep yourself outside of that and really work for the benefit of your client, you'll end up with lifelong clients, and that's part of that. That churn. That you're gonna have a less churn. You may have more of the ones that want to micromanage and the ones you really, sometimes cringe when I hear people saying, hey, just get rid of them. Sometimes it is best if you can afford to do it. And it's really on where you're at in your situation and keeping your staff employed and, all those things, because people are struggling. And sometimes, they're having to retain those clients and may not want to necessarily.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, here's what I want to do. I feel like we've pretty well covered this. I feel like people will say we got it. Got some good stuff there. There's a couple other things I want to cover with you guys before we run out of time. So one is, I know you guys talk as much or more than we do about the importance of being proactive versus reactive. And I'll set this up with, there's a great book by one of my favorite authors. It's actually a group of brothers called Chip and Dan Heath. They've written books like Switch. They've written books like Made to Stick, Decisive. Anyway, whole bunch of books. I think they're Duke University guys, and they're kind of in that Malcolm Gladwell, hey, there's a bunch of science and research behind this, but we're going to present it in ways people like Andrew Smallwood can understand and is more palatable. I'll take pictures when I can, but at least some good stories that illustrate the points is helpful. And the newest book is called Upstream. And the story of Upstream is about a couple of guys walking along the side of a river, and they see a child who is struggling to swim, floating down the middle of the river. And so, being good guys like Bryan Jenkins and Jonathan Cook, they jump in and they pull the child out of the river. They get over to the side of the river, and just as they've done that, they see about 50 yards up the river another child floating down the river. And so they jump back in again, pulling him over. And as they pull him over, they see two kids in the river struggling to come down. So one of them jumps back in, and as he comes up for air, making his way over, he's looking for his buddy, and he sees his buddy just bolting up the side of the riverbank. And he's like, hey, where are you going? You know, I need some help over here. There's two kids in the water. And he says, I'm going to catch the MFer who's putting kids in the water. Right? And so it's such a telling tale because so many property managers experience this on a day-to-day basis of feeling like they're pulling kids out of the water. And it's hard to get upstream and say, where does this problem originate from? How do I solve it up here? And listen, I would contend that reactive maintenance and doing reactive maintenance well, that is a incredibly valuable skill because it's going to inevitably happen at some point. So you need to be skilled and good at handling it. I wouldn't suggest everyone goes always upstream all of the time, right? But you have to understand the whole stream and look for where are the opportunities upstream to be more proactive. And so with that kind of laid out,
you need to have Ray Hespen on from Property Mail just to kind of talk through that a little bit because he's actually got some great thoughts. I had a detailed conversation with him at Southern States and in regard to proactively working maintenance and the benefit to clients and property managers from that aspect. But highly recommend talking to him as a potential guest for your future episodes. So.
You know, we're all good friends, so we'll definitely get Ray here at some point. I'd love to ask you guys the practical question, like, hey, everyone, great story. It's hard to find someone who would disagree with saying, like, no, I don't want to be proactive, right? But hey,
how do you do it?
That's it. That's the question for you guys of, what's working for you in AHI, places where you've gone proactive that you're seeing a big benefit, and talk a little bit about the benefits you're seeing and what you're doing.
I'm going to take the easy one.
Okay.
I'm just going to take it. It's just sitting on the table.
It's
too easy to not literally just point the camera back at you, Andrew, and say, well, second nature is like an exact perfect. It's the best example that I walk clients when I explain to clients the proactive, because I have this conversation with clients. I tell them that we're proactive versus reactive, and they have the same question. Well, what does that mean? How does that work? And my example, 90% of the time is second nature. I say 90, it's 99. It's just second nature. So we internally experienced a 40% reduction in HVAC maintenance calls from the time that we started using second nature to current. 40% is a ridiculous number. That's astronomical. And when I tell them, that is a number that uneducated accidental landlords go, oh, wow, that's big, because it's such a big number. when we're talking about preventative maintenance, and it's so simple, and every time we think about it, and I get to my house and I walk underneath my air filter, I go, I need to change it right now. It just makes me think of it, because it's such a big difference to the life of that HVAC system, and the cost of second nature versus the cost of an HVAC system is ridiculous. Yeah. $4,500 is like your starting point for I've got to replace this HVAC versus I'm going to have a filter delivered to my house every 60 days.
Well, the other dynamic with that is
it's insane.
We talk about triple win philosophy, and we're on your podcast.
The triple win podcast is a perfect example of that too.
So part of that, looking through that lens, is Jonathan's touched upon two benefited parties. Well, really three, but we can expand upon that. So obviously the owner's benefiting because there's reduction in maintenance cost, longevity of equipment lifespan, but then your staff's benefiting from it because you have fewer work orders you're issuing, so it's fewer man hours dedicated to that task for that property, and then the residents benefiting from it for cleaner air, lower utilities,
convenience,
and the convenience of not having their air conditioning unit fail, right? So that
also
is
the convenience of not having to go get it.
That's true.
Like, it is such a great convenience.
Tacking those on. That's why we use that as an example, just because that one really gives benefits to everybody involved on multiple levels, not just one here, one there. But really, you tie that in, Andrew. You tie something as simple as the filter change in, reduction in maintenance. Experienced operators know that the more maintenance you have with a resident, you're highly more likely to lose that resident from that property in a lease renewal process. Therefore, scaling down your length of tenancy. But what we see is, happy tenants stay. With happy tenants staying come happy owners if you're doing your job well. So you're really giving longevity to all those relationships that benefit you, the property manager, and allowing that revenue to continue flowing. We talked about churn rate. That's a property you're not losing for any reason outside of your own control, or within your control. But really being proactive is, there's so many different levels to it. I think, one of the things we like to do is with our podcast, the intent with our podcast was an education piece, designed specifically for intentional investors that were getting into it. And, one of the things that we do, and something I recommend to listeners, if you're getting into that space of trying to figure out how you start to work with those intentional investors and the lingo and that sort of thing, is go to where they're initially learning, understanding what they're being taught, and then coming back and being the market expert and being able to identify that, hey, we know what we're doing, and then we know where you're coming from. So we know what you're hearing and what's being discussed, not only where they're getting their education, but also in those cocktail parties amongst their friends that have expendable income to buy a property here and there. So those pieces, it all really plays together. And if you're being proactive with the education, then we get into, something we started this year, was the quarterly Zoom calls with our clients, giving them the why. So why are we doing this? Why have we onboarded this system, this policy, this procedure? It's not telling them how we're doing it. We're just giving them the why so they can get our vision and understand that we're working in their benefit.
And that's where it goes from just proactive maintenance to proactive management.
It does. And again, it creates long-term clients, because I can't even tell you how many dozens upon dozens of emails and just comments in our chat while we're doing them. Just, the owner clients, and I'll quit using the word owner. Ray and I were discussing, trying to create this shift of mentality and dropping the word owner and inserting the word investor, because that's where we all need to be, is all of our investors, kicking back positive feedback. We've not had one negative comment from any of that. And many times will be, hey, I couldn't make it. Can you send that out to me? Which we do to all of our all of our investors anyways, but just the specifics. And it's good to feel that. And they appreciate the communication. Nobody's doing that.
Well, there's certain clients that we have where if you're doing a good job as a property manager, if you have a tenant that stays in place 7 or 8 years and you haven't touched base with that owner because you haven't had to remarket or anything, how do they know that you now use second nature? How do they know that, oh, now we're doing Rhino or whatever it may be? How do they know why we're doing these new things? How do they know that we're getting better at our
just
jobs?
Based on my own experience, painfully from the past, is those clients are, it's kind of what we were talking about a little bit before we came on air was, hey, the only time I hear from you is when you need something or something's wrong. And then the other piece of that was with that example, it's like, hey, what do you mean your rates are now this? I was paying this back when I signed up. Yeah, but you're getting all the benefit of this. So understanding, and it's great. I love seeing clients that I've had for 15 plus years on those Zoom calls asking questions because they're seeing our growth and they're seeing that we've got our foot on the gas. We're improving the company, improving our processes, our personnel, our education, and better managing their properties. And they appreciate it. I mean, we've had a lot of comments from long-term clients that are actually, hey, we stuck with you. We're so glad we're here, and you guys are doing some great things. So that it really just comes down to that. And my last thought, and I'll get off my soapbox in regard to proactive versus reactive. When you're in reactive, you're in firefighting mode all day long. Your days are hectic. You don't have structure. You can't advance what you're trying to do to improve your staff, your company, your client experience, your resident experience. You just get stuck in the muck and you really can't proceduralize. And it's not until you proceduralize that things get better and you have the ability to grow and to go after the clients you're looking for. You've always got to be able to pivot because you're gonna have a day, a week, a month. We just had a transition in one of our offices where we had to come in and do some reactive stuff to get back to proactive with procedures rolled back out and reestablished, in which the nice thing is the team all knows what to do and they come in and it's just like it's almost like, the Serpro commercials, like it never happened. Is you come in and you just correct everything, get it back on track, and then you're right back in your systems again. But really, it's property management, and people either love it or hate it. I love it, and most people that love it are problem solvers, and we just like doing what we're doing. So there's always going to be challenges. If there weren't, it'd just be any other boring job.
That's so great. You guys covered so much there. I want to know it's great. I just want to reflect back a couple important things. I think it's a good transition from, we talked about proactive preventive maintenance, and how that, Jonathan made the point of there's a tie from that to something bigger of just proactive management. And here's how we look at this. One of the important things you guys mentioned was, it's not just the preventive maintenance, but when you think about how that impacts the experience of the resident, right? This is where so many one-star reviews come from. Oh, God, right? Yes. Is the broken HVAC. It's your staff getting beat down and ruining their day because of that emotional call from somebody who is just upset and determined to be upset, right? And when you have a happier resident, you have what you guys call the stickiness factor. We may talk about that later. Of you reduce your vacancy cost, right, for the investor, and that's a critical piece to winning the game in SFR. It's one of the biggest costs is that vacancy cost, and I think it just goes to speak to how you guys adopt, not just the lens of the triple win, but the real spirit behind it, which is it's driven by not how do we maximize transaction value on a moment-to-moment basis, but how do we maximize the lifetime value of this relationship, right, with a resident, with an investor. And when you make decisions from that point of view, which is different, you start to make decisions differently that optimize for long term, right? For everybody versus the short term or the moment. And it's showing up in your guys' results. So it's great to hear. Let's move to communication. We had David Osborne, who's an investor that has over 100 single-family properties himself. He shared some great stuff, and one of the highlights from that was him people asked him, I think it was Brad Randall that just asked him, like, what's the difference between the professional property managers you hire, right, and the ones that you don't? Like, what made you choose the teams that you work with, or versus doing it yourself, everything else? And he said, well, of course, performance matters, and really it comes down to great communication. And so I think so many people in this industry know how important communication is. But I'd love for you guys to speak to that. We talked about the Zoom calls, but how do you guys think about communication, doing it well? What are some practical things you could share with the listeners in the audience about communication?
I would say slow it down. Slow it down is huge. And that sounds vague and just like here's some advice to put on a tweet and leave it alone. That's not, today is a really good example of this, is because of some weird phone tree shenanigans. I've been getting tenant calls, and it's awesome. It's hilarious and adorable. And I took this call from a tenant out in Oklahoma City that was having a maintenance problem. And I've been trying to do, and I was like, okay, hang on. And instead of just saying, all right, here's the extension, the extension that you need to call, I don't want to talk to you. Like that's always the reaction. That seems to be the reaction always when it comes to communicating. And I'm talking about with tenants and owners. Oh, I don't want to talk to him. Just let me put it in an email. Okay, because you don't want to have anybody yell at you. I mean, having thick skin is a great thing to have in this industry. I let her yell at me for 5 minutes. Yeah. I let her yell at me about the problem, about how it's this and this and this. And I don't want to have to get a lawyer involved and blah, blah, blah. I just sat there and listened for a minute, and I slowed it down and said, okay, let's talk about the steps that you've gone through. Now, I'm the business development manager, and I'm on the road right this minute. So I'm not going to be able to get to your property in Oklahoma because I'm in Birmingham and fix it directly. So let's slowly walk through all the steps that you've done, what steps we have done, and let's figure out the best way to do this. And then she was, okay, well, this is what's happened. This is what I've done. And I was like, okay, I understand that. And then I educated her, like, not in a condescending manner, just, okay, so as a resident, you don't always understand who owns what, who makes what decisions, okay, so just the current situation. Let's talk about the ownership of the property that you're in, who gets to make what decisions, where it needs to be made, and how they're looking at it. And through just a short little conversation and talking about it not in reaction method, which is what we're talking about here. You don't want to. I didn't want to just spray water at the fire and, oh, you need to talk to someone else. Now I'm not on the phone anymore. It's, let me understand what you're saying, and let me see if you understand what I'm saying. Does this make sense? Yeah, it does. Okay, so this is what I think our next steps should be. And we will keep working on these steps in this manner until the problem is resolved. And she was like, that is great. Thank you so much for telling me how to do this. And it went from, I hate everybody and I'm going to sue your company, to, I am so appreciative that I got to speak with you on the phone. That is more help than I've ever received from anybody in a property management setting.
And then the follow-up, obviously, is vitally important. So,
yeah.
And I guess that's to the point. We took it on a very singular level there to make it a very basic case that everybody deals with day in and day out. But it's really disciplining yourself. When you get involved in something, don't just touch it and walk away, hand it off. Do the follow-up and make sure that it's been handled and it's worth it. It'll be worth it in the, just in the experience from the resident in this particular case. And I would also say, on the owner, we talked a little bit about the communication aspect of how some of our older clients have really just appreciated what we've been doing with communication and as to educating on the why. And then, we've had just podcast subscribers that have picked up that have been clients for, 15 plus years. And then, part of it is also it's kind of like what David was alluding to. It's, I go back to a client that we landed, it's been about 5 years ago. And so it was between this firm and two other firms here locally. And we were going through the interview process, and, the main asset manager in respect to that portfolio came back to me at a later point and said, in the first 5 minutes, I knew I was going to hire you guys. And I pushed him a little bit, and I'm like, why did you know in the first 5 minutes? And he said, well, you knew your numbers. And so my message there is know your metrics, know your company metrics, and know what types of questions investors are asking. And we're always helpful or just, willing to just kind of share that information with anybody that might be interested. But
Bryan teaches a wonderful class on KPIs. It's unbelievable.
But it's so easy. And it once you get it set up, and even with us with five locations and getting my managers to give that back to me every month, there's some resistance on the front end. But once you get rolling with it, they love it, because then it's like, hey, I get a gauge how my market's doing. And then I get to gauge every market plus the entire company together. And I turn around and share those results with Jonathan, so he sees the business development side of it as well. But just knowing that. And then, another comment that David made, and when we pushed off into our breakout groups, I brought this up because it stuck with me. Just wanted to understand how property managers viewed the remark that he made. But he said, we bring in some of our own systems and we ask them to follow our systems. So many of your listeners, I'm sure, are like, I don't want to, we're not going to take that client on. But I would implore you to entertain the thought, because some of your larger clients, they're going to have their own systems and procedures and things they like. There is a meeting of the minds that you can come to with them after you establish yourself as the expert. And then you come together and you're working together as a team. And that's the environment you want to have. And we've had a lot of success with large clients. One of those we got off the podcast, by the way. But it just continues to grow, and we're their go-to. And ironically, that's that same client that we just talked out of the deal. But that's the type of relationship we have, because I view that as a team environment where we're both contributing our expertise into the mix. But there's certain things that they like to have done their way, and there's certain things we like to have done our way, and some things we do our way regardless, and some we'll give and take, and that's for every operator to figure out as a firm owner as to what they're willing to do or not do to have that business. And please don't understand what I'm saying as give away everything within your organization and put all your eggs in that one basket. Don't ever do that. But
there's a risk assessment.
There is. You can't draw a hard line, in my opinion, and be able to be flexible and be able to pivot and grow and learn, honestly. Because a lot of these clients have taught us a lot of useful just tricks of the trade throughout the years, and particularly in the reporting aspect and knowing what they're looking for. And it kind of goes back to something I said earlier, is understanding where your client's being educated. So if we know what they're thinking, how they think, we can absorb that, we can manage it, we can merge it, we can manipulate it, and really form something that works for everybody.
I want to say this as we wrap up. I'll give you guys the last word in case there's something like, oh man, we didn't talk about XYZ, and people need to know about that. But what I love about what you guys just shared is, I think for people listening, to bring this full circle, I think about the communication needs of an institutional investor, what kind of numbers they're looking for, on what frequency, et cetera. And I think what you guys have shared is, hey, before we started working with that customer, we might have done things differently, reported differently, approached things differently. And as they expressed their needs to us and what was motivated by, we were able to be collaborative with them. And able to, and hey, we learned some things from that might even be valuable to other people as well. And it's informed how you do things. That's great. And that is different than the intentional investor or the accidental owner. Jonathan, I love what you shared at the beginning, and just a very practical example. I think people, listen, anyone listening to this, the Triple Win podcast is not for people who got into property management yesterday. You know, this is for the pros, the dedicated professional property managers. So everyone can relate to the kind of scenario, the importance of having thick skin, the importance of empathy, being willing to slow down, and being able to meet that person where they are and then take them to a point of view or a different conversation about here's what's going on. Here's how to think about this to get what you want, right? And this result. And so here's what we're going to do next. And I loved how Bryan reinforced that with, and then we live in a world today where you order a Domino's pizza and you can see to the second when it's being made, when it's in the car, when it's a block away, when it's at your doorstep, right? And so there's all these things happening that influence people's expectations about what good information sharing looks like, right? About what good communication looks like. And so it seems to me like you guys have recognized that. Here's what's happening with people's expectations. Let's manage those expectations, right? Help set those expectations. And let's deliver on an experience of communication that meets or ideally exceeds those things. And then the last thing I wrote down was, if people are only hearing from you when you need something from them or when you have bad news, right? Here is a bill to pay. Then you're conditioning people to not want to take the phone call, which is, I think, what you said, how a lot of property managers feel, right? Yeah. When a property owner's calling them, they're like, oh, I'm afraid, let me just handle this by email because it's a big emotional investment to get into this one, right? And how do you change that relationship? You know, a big part of it is doing the kind of things you guys do, proactively educating, proactively setting expectations, proactively delivering good news, delivering these positive touch points and things that, you know, here's where we're succeeding, here's what's going well, how important that is to have that kind of relationship. So when the bad things happen, right, you guys have invested, you've put deposits into an account, so that when a bad thing happens, like you can make a withdrawal and your check won't bounce, right? That's right. In that relationship. So I just love what you guys shared there. I'm sure a lot of people will be taking that away as a highlight. Let me turn it back to you guys. Anything else you feel would be important to share? Anything else you'd like to say?
Oh, well, you want to go first?
No.
You don't?
No.
Well, I would just honestly, I would just like to, offer up just, any if anybody just wants somebody to hear what their problem is, I'm always available. Always make myself available. Easy way to reach out to us is podcast@ahiproperties.com. It goes to both of us, and we're happy to chip in. That there's a lot of programs, and again, we're not perfect. We identify kind of the why something's happening and try to address it and be proactive with it. And when you get off track, just focus on getting back on track. I mean, that's the easiest approach because it's going to come off track. It's just being in this industry for as long as I have, I've seen it happen many, many times. But as long as you're always improving and trying to make yourself and your team better. And the other thing I would recommend, if somebody's, if they're a leader in their company or a firm runner, take your managers and your team members, and they're going to bring problems to you, but always ask, what would you do? And let them come up with their own solution. And that's a good education piece. You can talk through stuff together, and come up with solutions that work for everyone. So, but again, I thank you. And I'll let Jonathan say his piece, but Andrew, thank you so much for having us on. I appreciate it, and I always appreciate you guys. You guys have done so much for our industry, and I think you guys are just top notch and some of my favorite people. So appreciate everything you guys have done.
So yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, Andrew, you and the Second Nature team have always been more than a delight to see at every outing that Bryan and I go to, it's like, oh, that's where we're looking. Where's the purple? Where's our guys? All right, so we're going to go hang out over here with our friends before we start work. I mean, I appreciate everything that you guys do in this industry because y'all are, leaders. Y'all are trendsetters. You guys are fantastic. I appreciate everything you guys do. I'll come back to the point that I've been making the entire time, and I understand that I benefit from being at a company where I have a Bryan Jenkins to set me up for success in a way that not everybody gets. And that's a big step that I get that some people don't. And I don't know a way around that other than get yourself a Bryan Jenkins. I don't know how to solve that for everybody. But the thing that I think sets us apart from a lot of people is not something that is intangible. It's not impossible to do. It's knowledge. Knowledge is not just a thing that I was born with or Bryan was born with. It's research. It's find that information out. It's not just identify a problem and leave it sitting there. Find a solution. Figure it out. I spend the majority of every day that I am here in this office doing research, whether that is on the national trends of the real estate investment market, my local individual markets, what they've looked like for the last 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, whatever it is, some new concepts that someone may have come up with, some maintenance solutions that can drop a percentage here and there. And so that I am equipped with the answers to these accidental landlords or these intentional investors that come through, even the best intentional investors we have, even some big fund, like institutional investors don't know everything. They might know the big concept from a 10,000-foot view of the national averages are X. But when it comes to some street in Birmingham, Alabama, they don't know it from a hole in the ground. They don't know why, the north side of this area rents for this amount and the south side of this area rents for this amount and where those dividing lines are. And so understanding what the goal is and having enough equipped knowledge to say, okay, so I know both of these are within 500 yards of each other, and I know you own both of them, but I can't put them both at the same rental price because this means this, and this is where this dividing line is. That's why we need to change this to this and this to this, and just have some reasoning behind it. And it helps if you have a bunch of Excel sheets and graphs and stuff to show behind that I've done the research, but you don't have that unless you do the research. Find out. Just Bryan talks about key performance indicators, teaches a class on it. You don't just know that you need those KPIs before you have them. Monthly, we report a ton of information to Bryan for him to come up with those numbers, for us to all be equipped with those numbers, for us to report them back to other people. You got to have it. The only way to find out is to do research, educate yourself on it.
Yeah,
and that goes a long way.
Kind of back to that frameworks concept. Once you have a framework set up for it, it's super easy. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's what's it take you to put your portion together each month?
45 minutes.
Yeah, 45 minutes, hour max, branch managers. So, and it's something that was laborsome in the beginning. We're all, A, we're human, B, we're property managers. We don't like new things. We don't like change usually. Try to break that mold and encourage our teams to do that. But I think, just valuing, sharing the why, and that's the big thing. We don't share that with our clients. We share it with our team. So they understand why we're bringing these things on and doing these things, because the buy-in is the success marker, and understanding that sometimes some of those things get adopted well. Sometimes they take a little time, and other times they don't. So it's just something that we're always trying to improve upon, and always, leave with one thing. It's like, just do the right thing. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, do the right thing. And I think if you can do the right thing, you're going to be successful.
What a fantastic note to end on. Two of my favorite people, and anybody who's listening to this, I just want to express publicly some appreciation to Bryan and Jonathan for, giving a piece of their life to all of us today and sharing their expertise, being generous with what they shared today. I'm sure there's multiple things you could be finding helpful here. There's a lot of things that were practical you could take action on right away, which is great, as well as some bigger ideas that can inform how you work on things for a long period of time. And when I think about two of my favorite people in the industry, I'm looking at them right now, and I just think about what a great duo you two are. It's our first duo podcast.
Boom.
And when I think about the calm and the composure of a Bryan Jenkins, and how, like, that would be a voice I would want to listen to, and a person I'd want to listen to in the property management industry for a long, long time.
You need to tell my wife that, though, Andrew. No, I'm just joking. We work together. How many couples do you know that actually work together? So, well, he does too. I forgot about that. So
my wife's downstairs.
There's another dynamic duo. That's right. The Jenkins and
the Cooks.
She's
The
incredible.
Cooks.
That's right. The Cooks.
It's fun stuff.
It's great. And Jonathan, I think of your energy, your passion. It comes through. The genuine care comes through, and your passion for helping people, educating people, you're in the right seat on the bus for sure at AHI for everything you do, and you contribute in a big, big way, not just in the company but in the industry, and you're spreading your influence, beyond even just the company you're in. We appreciate you for that. And listen, guys, this was a lot of fun, really valuable. Thanks again for taking the time with us.
Thank you so much, man.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of The Triple Win. Thanks go out to Carol Housel and Jeff Tucker for everything they do to put these episodes together. And we want to remind everyone that you can find more resources, upcoming events, a link to our private Facebook group where the conversation continues in between these episodes with other professional property managers. All of that you can find at rbp.secondnature.com. Again, that's rbp.secondnature.com. And until next time, keep transforming what it means to be in professional property management by finding and applying your next triple win. We want it to be true that every time we see you, we see a better version of you and your business. With that, cheers.